to me! This is the only way forward! How dare you even look at me! You are nothing!
The explosion tore through the calm of Maple Ridge like a war drum at dawn. Windows quivered, alarms howled, and the air rippled with shock. People spilled from their perfect houses in bathrobes and slippers, faces pale, clutching their phones. Thick smoke spiraled out of Karen Whitmore's immaculate white chimney, black and oily, a flag of chaos rising over the neighborhood she ruled. She stood in her driveway, shrieking at the firefighters, robes scorched, one slipper missing. "It's faulty wood! I bought it locally!" Her voice cracked under the weight of disbelief and humiliation. I watched from my porch, coffee in hand, a smirk forming before I could stop it. I didn't need to ask what happened. I knew exactly what had gone up in smoke. For weeks, she had been sneaking into my yard at night, my yard stealing logs from the very pile she fined me for violating community aesthetics. The same pile, she said, made the neighborhood look less symmetrical. Karen Whitmore loved symmetry, loved rules, loved control. And when she couldn't control you, she punished you. It wasn't the theft that bothered me. It was the arrogance, the way she wielded her power like a weapon wrapped in a smile. She thought Maple Ridge was her kingdom, and everyone else were tenants in her illusion of order. But me? I don't kneel for paper crowns. Before all this madness, life here was sterile in a way that pretended to be peaceful. Manicured lawns, white fences, and the same 5 conversation topics at every HOA meeting. You could feel the fear behind the smiles, the quiet understanding that one wrong color of mulch could earn you a warning letter. It was like living in a Stepford painting with a pulse. I moved here 8 years ago, after losing my wife to cancer. The silence was supposed to heal me. I built my home with my own hands, designed every detail. Out back, I had a small workshop, a sanctuary of sawdust, steel, and solitude. My woodpile sat beside it, neat and even, each log split by hand. There's something meditative about splitting wood. The rhythm, the sound, the honesty. Wood doesn't lie. It doesn't gossip. It just breaks clean. Or it doesn't. The neighbors were fine, quiet, predictable, until Karen moved in. She arrived like a storm, disguised as sunshine. Blonde bob, expensive perfume, heels clicking on the pavement like gunfire. Within a month, she was HOA president. No one even remembered a vote. She just appeared one day with a badge, a clipboard, and a tone that said she'd been born in charge. Her first visit to my house was almost polite. Almost. She knocked 3 times, sharp and deliberate, then smiled with the warmth of a politician's photo op. "Mr. Thompson," she began, "I'm afraid your woodpile violates our neighborhood's aesthetic guidelines." I blinked. "It's behind my shed." She stepped to the side, squinting toward the fence. "Yes, but from certain angles, it disrupts the visual flow of the street." I laughed. Couldn't help it. "It's wood, Karen. I'm not running an art exhibit." Her expression didn't change. "You'll need to move it within 10 days. The HOA will issue a fine otherwise." Then she turned on her heel and left, the scent of her perfume lingering like a warning label. I didn't move it. I just stacked it neater. Thought maybe she'd get bored. But Karen doesn't get bored. She escalates. A week later, I noticed something strange. The pile looked smaller. Maybe it was me, I thought. Maybe I just miscounted. But then, 2 days later, smaller again. I started keeping track. 20 logs one day, 15 the next, always at night. I carved small notches into the ends of the logs, my craftsman's signature. If any went missing, I'd know. Then I set up a motion light behind the shed. The first night, raccoons. The second, nothing. The third movement, 11:37 p.m. A shadow slipped through the gate, slim, confident, moving like she belonged there. The light caught a glint of metal, a bracelet, catching moonlight. Karen. The next morning, 4 marked logs gone. high heel prints pressed into the damp soil by the gate. My jaw clenched, but I didn't confront her. Not yet. People like Karen feed on conflict. She wanted a scene. I wasn't going to give her one. Instead, I got a letter, hand-delivered. Dear Mr. Thompson, your outdoor wood storage continues to violate Section 3A of the HOA Code. Failure to comply will result in disciplinary action. Signed, President Karen Whitmore. She was fining me for the same wood she was stealing. That's when something inside me shifted. I wasn't just angry, I was insulted. So I decided to stop reacting and start designing. I dusted off my old engineering pad, the one I hadn't used since my last contract job. Across the top, I wrote, Project Firewood. It wasn't revenge. Not exactly. It was a lesson. Physics, accountability, irony, call it whatever you like, but it was going to be memorable. In my workshop, I pulled together materials from old projects. Hollow oak cores, small amounts of leftover black powder from fireworks, and an engineer's attention to detail. I built 3 hollow logs, each filled just enough to pop loudly when burned, harmless but theatrical. I sealed them with bark, rubbed them in ash, and stacked them in the middle of my woodpile. As I worked, I could almost hear her voice. Community standards, Mr. Thompson, I grinned. Let's raise the standards, Karen. But before I set the trap, I wanted evidence, proof beyond denial, so I installed 2 cameras. One above the shed, hidden in the eaves, and another disguised as a bird feeder facing the gate. They streamed straight to my phone, recording everything. Night 1, nothing. Night 2, wind. Night 3, 12:14 a.m. The motion alert buzzed. I opened the app. There she was, Karen Whitmore, in her beige coat, scarf, and those same ridiculous high heels, creeping into my yard with a flashlight, calm as ever. She stacked my wood neatly beside her, whispering, He won't notice. It's for the community, for the community. I almost choked laughing. She loaded the SUV, brushed her gloves together, and walked off like a thief in heels. I replayed the footage again and again, frame by frame, capturing her smug expression in perfect clarity. Now, most people would have gone to the police. But people like Karen know how to twist the system. They are the system. She'd have spun it into harassment or defamation. So I let her think she was winning. I let her light the match. The next morning, I passed by her house. Through her wide front windows, I saw my logs stacked by her fireplace like trophies. She waved when she saw me. That smug wave that says, I own you. I raised my coffee cup in return. Enjoy the warmth, I muttered. That night, the neighborhood slept under a calm sky. I sat by my porch, watching frost gather on the grass, and whispered to no one, tomorrow's forecast, partly cloudy with a chance of justice. And when the explosion came, echoing through the still air of Maple Ridge, I didn't flinch. I just smiled, the same way an inventor watches his prototype perform exactly as designed. The morning after the explosion, Maple Ridge looked like a battlefield disguised as suburbia. Charred bits of ash still clung to Karen's front yard. The white trim of her porch was blackened, and the welcome home mat had been reduced to a curled lump of fabric. Fire investigators had come and gone, leaving her house taped off like a crime scene. I could still smell smoke drifting down the cul-de-sac, sweet and acrid, like burned pride. I stood on my porch with a mug of coffee, watching her storm about her lawn in designer sunglasses, barking orders at a contractor. She was still trying to look in control, but her robe had been replaced by a crisp navy suit, her armor. She shouted something about negligence, about faulty wood purchased from a questionable source. I almost laughed. Then my phone buzzed a message in the neighborhood group chat. Does anyone know what happened at Karen's place last night? Dozens of replies followed. Rumors flew faster than embers. Gas leak? Chimney malfunction? Sabotage? I typed one line and hit send. Always test your firewood. Within minutes, the message blew up with laughing emojis and nervous jokes. Karen must have seen it, because less than an hour later, I heard the sharp click, click, click of heels approaching my driveway. "Mr. Thompson," she snapped, voice slicing through the cold air. "We need to talk." I sipped my coffee. "About your home improvement project?" She ignored the jab. "You think you're clever, don't you? Setting me up like this." "Set you up?" I said calmly. "You mean the wood you stole?" Her nostrils flared. "I didn't steal anything. You left it out in public view. In my fenced backyard." She leaned closer, her perfume heavy and synthetic. "I could have been killed, Tom. That wood was dangerous. Illegal, even. You'll hear from the board about this." "Oh, I look forward to it," I said, letting a smile flicker. "Be sure to bring your lawyer, and your conscience if you can find it." Her jaw locked. For the first time, I saw something behind her eyes that wasn't arrogance, it was fear. Not of me, but of losing control. She turned on her heel and stormed off, her SUV screeching away. That evening, a letter appeared on my porch. No stamp, no envelope, just a folded sheet of paper, typed and signed with venom. Notice of HOA hearing subject. Violation of community safety protocols. Mr. Thompson, you are hereby summoned to a disciplinary hearing regarding your unauthorized use of surveillance devices and hazardous materials endangering HOA residents. President Karen Whitmore. I actually laughed. Out loud. She'd gone from thief to victim to prosecutor in less than 24 hours. That was Karen control freak turned crusader. But this time, I wasn't the one cornered. I spent the next 2 days preparing like an engineer facing a stress test. I printed out still frames from the surveillance footage. Karen entering my yard, flashlight in hand, dragging logs into her SUV. I backed up the video to 3 separate drives and even emailed it to myself just in case she tried pulling a data breach stunt. By Thursday night, I was ready. The HOA clubhouse was packed. Word had spread like wildfire, ironic, given the circumstances. Residents who hadn't attended a meeting in years showed up, whispering behind their coffee cups. The room buzzed with anticipation, the air thick with the smell of cheap pastries and revenge. Karen sat at the head of the table, perfectly composed, her hair lacquered into submission. She had allies flanking her, Mrs. Beasley, the treasurer, trying to look neutral, and 2 new board members who clearly regretted showing up. Karen's eyes flicked to me as I walked in. The smile she gave me was all teeth. "Mr. Thompson," she said smoothly, "thank you for joining us. Please have a seat. We're here to discuss your misconduct." I took a seat in the front row, unbuttoned my jacket, and met her gaze. "You mean my firewood?" A few chuckles rippled through the crowd. Karen's smile tightened. "This meeting is not for jokes. Your reckless behavior resulted in a fire. An explosion that could have endangered lives." I raised an eyebrow. "Endangered yours, you mean?" A few gasps. She ignored them. "You installed illegal surveillance cameras, constructed hazardous devices, and caused substantial property damage." She leaned forward, tone dripping with superiority. "Do you deny it?" I folded my arms. "Absolutely. I didn't construct hazardous anything. What happened was a chemical reaction caused when you stole materials that didn't belong to you." Karen's face twitched. "That's a lie." "Funny," I said, pulling out my tablet. "My camera disagrees." The room went silent. I connected my tablet to the projector. The screen flickered, and then there she was. Clear as daylight. Karen Whitmore, midnight coat, flashlight in hand, stepping through my gate and stacking logs into her SUV. Someone in the back whispered, "Oh my God." Karen shot to her feet. "This is harassment. This is illegal surveillance." "The cameras are on my property," I said calmly. "Completely legal. Want to argue with the law too?" Her eyes darted around the room. People were staring not with respect anymore, but disgust. Mrs. Beasley cleared her throat. "Karen, that's you." Karen's lips trembled. "I was inspecting. Routine HOA safety inspection." I laughed. Couldn't help it. "At midnight? In heels? With a flashlight?" Laughter erupted. A few even clapped. Karen's face went crimson. "You'll regret this, Thompson," she hissed. "Already did," I said. "The first day you moved in." She lunged for the power cord and yanked it out, cutting the video off. "This meeting is adjourned," but no one moved. The vice president, a quiet man named Wilson, stood up. "Actually, President Whitmore, you don't have the authority to adjourn a disciplinary hearing against yourself." Gasps. Karen froze. Wilson turned to the crowd. "Given the evidence presented, it's clear that Mrs. Whitmore engaged in trespassing and theft. I motion for an immediate review of her conduct as HOA president." Karen's voice cracked. "You can't do that. I am the HOA." "Not anymore," Wilson said softly. The room erupted into chatter. Karen's allies shrank in their chairs. I sat still, watching the dominoes fall exactly as I'd predicted. Karen tried one last defense. "He planted that wood. He's dangerous." I stood. "You're right, Karen. I am dangerous to hypocrisy." She screamed something incoherent and stormed out, slamming the door so hard a ceiling tile trembled. The meeting dissolved into laughter, applause, and whispered gossip. Mrs. Beasley turned to me, cheeks pink. "Well, Tom, that was dramatic." "Just science," I said with a shrug. "And timing." That night, I walked home through the crisp autumn air. The houses glowed warm behind curtained windows. The neighborhood felt different, lighter. For the first time in years, people smiled without checking over their shoulders. I stopped at my gate and looked up at the sky. The stars were sharp and cold, glittering like sparks over Maple Ridge. Somewhere in the distance, I could still smell smoke. I took a deep breath and whispered, "To order restored." But I knew better. Karen wasn't finished, not yet, because people like her don't crumble quietly. They rebuild vindictive, desperate, dangerous. And something told me the real fire was just getting started. For 3 days after the hearing, Maple Ridge was silent, too silent, like the calm between lightning and thunder. No HOA letters, no Karen sightings, no measuring tape snapping outside anyone's window. You could almost hear the neighborhood exhale. People walked their dogs without looking over their shoulders. The Miller kids played soccer on the cul-de-sac. For a moment, it felt like peace. But peace in this town never lasts long, especially when Karen Whitmore is involved. The first crack came in the form of a flyer. Monday morning, I opened my mailbox to find a glossy paper folded in half, stuffed inside like a warning. Across the top, in red ink, the truth about the Firewood incident. I didn't even need to read it to know who wrote it. Inside, paragraphs of dramatized nonsense painted me as an unstable recluse, a former engineer with a temper, a potential threat to community safety. She'd even included a grainy photo of me taken from across the street, probably while I was watering my garden, captioned, "The man behind the Samus." It was so absurd. I almost admired the effort. She distributed these door to door, one by one, late at night like a suburban ghost. I crumpled it, tossed it in the trash, and laughed. But underneath the amusement, something colder stirred. You see, Karen didn't need to be right to win. She just needed noise. She understood something most tyrants do. If you flood the air with enough chaos, the truth gets lost in the static. By Wednesday, the HOA group chat was boiling. People whispered that the explosion was intentional, that I had military experience, that I'd once been arrested. All false. But lies spread like firewood. They catch quick, and they burn slow. I could have confronted her again. Could have posted the footage online. Humiliated her a second time. But there's an art to revenge, and sometimes restraint is the sharpest blade. Instead, I waited. That Friday, a certified letter arrived from the county office. Inside, notice of an official safety investigation prompted by a citizen complaint alleging I was storing hazardous materials on my property. Classic Karen. I called the inspector myself and scheduled the visit. When he arrived, a polite man named Harris, with mud on his boots and patience in his eyes. I showed him everything. My shed, my tools, my neat workshop. No explosives, no hazards, just order. He nodded approvingly. Honestly, sir, this is the cleanest workshop I've seen in months. Thank you, I said. Maybe tell that to whoever sent the complaint. He smiled. I think I already know who. When the report cleared me completely, I pinned a copy to my mailbox right under the HOA bulletin board. The next morning, half the neighborhood stopped to read it. By noon, it was the talk of the street. And by dusk, Karen's car was parked outside my house again. I heard the door slam before I saw her. She marched toward me, heels stabbing into my gravel like accusations. You think you're clever, don't you? She spat. Trying to embarrass me? I looked up from my workbench. Karen, you embarrass yourself. I just hold the mirror. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but rage barely leashed. You're toxic. This community was perfect before you moved here. You brought chaos. Chaos, I repeated. You mean free will? Her eyes flashed. You'll regret mocking me. Already do, I said. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. You know what your problem is, Tom. You think people respect you because you're clever, but they laugh at you behind your back. You're the neighborhood freak, the widower with cameras. For a second, her words hit something raw. The mention of my wife, unexpected, deliberate, cut deeper than any fine or insult ever could. I didn't answer. Karen smirked, mistaking silence for defeat. Enjoy your peace while it lasts. She turned, walking away with the satisfaction of someone who still thought she held the leash. I stood there long after she left, fists tight, heart hammering. The air felt heavier, thicker with something unspoken. That night, I poured myself a whiskey and sat by the fire pit. The flames hissed and cracked like old secrets. I thought about my wife, the way she'd always told me to let go of grudges. Anger's like firewood, she'd said once. If you keep feeding it, you'll burn yourself too. But I wasn't angry, not anymore. I was focused. Karen had turned this into a campaign. I'd turn it into an education. The next morning, I uploaded the surveillance footage, the full, uncut video, to a cloud link and sent it to every member of the HOA board. I didn't post it publicly. I didn't have to. Rumors are like gasoline. All you need is one spark. By afternoon, the group chat had flipped. People started asking questions, real ones. If Tom was the threat, why is Karen on camera trespassing? Why did she lie about the report? Why are our dues funding her legal drama? The tide was turning again, and Karen knew it. That evening, she showed up at the clubhouse unannounced, demanding an emergency meeting. I didn't attend, but Wilson, the new acting president, called me afterward, voice still shaking from laughter. She tried to sue you, he said. Claimed emotional distress, property damage, and defamation, but the board rejected it unanimously. Unanimously? Even Beasley, he said, chuckling. She quoted you, actually. You can't steal someone's wood and cry arson. I laughed harder than I had in months, but the story didn't end there. Karen wasn't done losing. She was evolving. Over the next week, she started working behind the scenes. Anonymous complaints about noise from my workshop. Alleged suspicious chemicals in my shed. She even reported my mailbox for being an inch too tall. Every day, something new. It was harassment by 1,000 paper cuts. But what she didn't know was that every complaint generated paperwork, and paperwork creates records. I was documenting everything. Dates, times, signatures. By week's end, I had a folder thicker than the HOA charter itself. Then came the twist. One evening, as the sun dipped low, I got a call from Officer Ramirez, the same sheriff who'd responded after the explosion. Tom, he said, we got another report. Anonymous. Says you're hoarding explosives again. I sighed. Let me guess, the voice sounded like a midlife crisis with a manicure. He chuckled. We know it's her. But here's the thing. You want this to stop? File a harassment claim. We've got enough to back it. For a long moment, I didn't answer. Filing charges would end it, sure, but it would also make it real. A part of me wanted to handle it my way. Quiet, poetic, final. Not yet, I said finally. I've got one more lesson to teach, he sighed. You engineers and your experiments. Just don't blow anything up this time. No promises. The next day, I got to work. If Karen wanted to fight on the battlefield of appearances, I'd make sure she lost in front of the only court that mattered the neighborhood. I built something simple, a small wooden display box with a plaque. Inside, I placed one of the hollow firewood logs, empty, harmless, but visually perfect. Below it, engraved brass letters read, Exhibit A, When Arrogance Meets Physics, presented to the Maple Ridge HOA in appreciation of hard lessons learned. I installed it right by my mailbox, protected under glass. By sunset, the whole neighborhood had seen it. Photos spread through the group chat like wildfire. Memes followed. Someone edited Karen's face over a rocket. Another added the tagline, Community Standards Now Explosive. It was petty. It was perfect. By morning, she was back, furious, red-faced, trembling. "Take it down," she shouted, pounding on my fence. "You're mocking me publicly. It's public art," I said from the porch. "The HOA encourages creativity. You'll pay for this." "Pretty sure I already did with my dues," she screamed, a sound halfway between rage and despair before storming off. That night, the sky opened up with rain. Thunder rolled, lightning flashing across the clouds. I stood by the window watching the storm, feeling strangely calm. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was in control. And somewhere out there, I knew Karen was pacing her living room, planning her next move. But this time, it wouldn't matter. Because Maple Ridge had already made up its mind. They weren't following her anymore. They were laughing. And for someone like Karen, that's the one punishment worse than fire. The storm that rolled through Maple Ridge that night felt like an omen. Thunder cracked over the cul-de-sac, shaking the windows, while rain pelted rooftops like judgment. By morning, the clouds broke apart, and the world smelled of wet earth and renewal. A fitting backdrop, I thought, for what was about to happen, because Karen Whitmore's empire was about to fall. It began with an email. Wilson, the acting HOA president, sent it out early Sunday morning. Notice of emergency meeting topic, review of HOA leadership conduct and ethics, attendance strongly encouraged. Within an hour, every inbox in the neighborhood buzzed. People wanted blood, or at least accountability. Karen had been waging her whisper campaign for weeks, filing complaints, spreading rumors, threatening lawsuits, but she'd gone too far when she tried to fine Mrs. Jenkins, a 74-year-old widow, for having unapproved wind chimes. That was her mistake. People will tolerate tyranny when it's distant. But the moment it touches someone kind, everything changes. By evening, the clubhouse parking lot was full. Cars lined the streets, headlights glowing against the dark. Inside, the air was electric, buzzing with tension, and the scent of coffee brewed strong enough to wake a corpse. Karen sat at the head of the table, posture perfect, hair shellacked into its usual golden helmet. She was dressed for war in a beige power suit, pearls gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Her smile was tight, her hands trembling just slightly. I took my seat in the front row, folder in hand, calm as a surgeon. Wilson cleared his throat. "We'll begin this emergency meeting of the Maple Ridge Homeowners Association. The primary agenda, conduct review of President Whitmore." Karen interrupted before he could continue. "This is ridiculous. I've dedicated myself to this community. I've enforced the rules fairly and consistently. The accusations against me are baseless." "Then you won't mind if we review the evidence," Wilson said. She forced a laugh. "Evidence? What evidence?" He gestured toward me. "Mr. Thompson?" The crowd turned. I stood, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. "I'd rather not take too much of everyone's time," I began, "but I think we all deserve honesty. Over the past month, Mrs. Whitmore has repeatedly used her position to intimidate and harass residents, myself included. She's filed false reports, distributed defamatory flyers, and engaged in behavior unbecoming of her role." Karen's jaw clenched. "He's lying. Then I'll let the facts speak." I set my laptop on the table and opened the folder. Photos, documents, screenshots, all meticulously cataloged. Here's her complaint to the county inspector about alleged explosives, cleared as false. Here's the safety report verifying that my property meets every code. And here, I clicked to the next slide, is the footage of Mrs. Whitmore trespassing and removing private property from my yard. The room fell into stunned silence. The faint hum of the projector filled the air as the image froze. Karen, flashlight in hand, frozen mid-step like a thief caught in the act. Someone in the back whispered, "Good God." Karen's face turned pale, her lips trembling. That's taken out of context. I was inspecting, I said quietly. At midnight? In heels? A ripple of laughter passed through the crowd. Even Wilson's mouth twitched. Karen slammed her palm on the table. "You're all fools if you believe this. He's manipulating the narrative." Beasley, the treasurer, stood up slowly. Her voice wavered but steady. "Karen, enough. You fined me $50 for hanging a wreath that didn't match the seasonal palette. You made Mrs. Jenkins cry over wind chimes. You've humiliated half this neighborhood. Maybe it's time you listen instead of lecture." The room erupted in murmurs of agreement. Karen turned to her last allies, two nervous board members in matching polos. "Say something," she hissed. One of them cleared his throat. "Ma'am, with all due respect, it's hard to defend this." Her composure cracked. "You're all cowards. Without me, this neighborhood would fall apart. You need structure. You need rules." "No," Wilson said softly. "We need community." He turned to the crowd. Per HOA bylaws, any sitting president may be removed by emergency vote if found to act against the community's best interest. All in favor of removing Mrs. Whitmore as HOA president, raise your hand. One by one, hands rose. First a few, then dozens, then nearly everyone. Karen's eyes widened. "You can't do this! You need me!" Wilson nodded solemnly. "I think we'll manage." For a moment, the room was silent, except for the soft buzz of the lights. Then, slowly, someone started clapping. Beasley, of all people. Then Jenkins, then the entire room. The sound grew sharp, echoing, cathartic. Karen stood frozen, face red, shaking. "You'll regret this. I'll sue every one of you." "Add it to your to-do list," I said quietly. Her glare cut toward me like a blade. "You think you've won, don't you?" "I don't win," I said. "I just stop losing." She stormed out, heels clicking furiously, slamming the door behind her. The applause followed her into the night. For a moment, no one moved. Then Wilson sighed, rubbing his temples. "Well, I suppose we'll need a new president." A voice from the back shouted, "Nominate Thompson!" I nearly choked. Oh, hell no. Laughter erupted again, easy and genuine this time. Wilson smiled. Point taken. "But for the record, Tom, you've done more for this community than most presidents ever have." I shrugged. "I just wanted my firewood." That night, Maple Ridge changed. You could feel it. Neighbors lingered outside, talking long after the meeting ended. Jenkins invited people over for tea. The Millers started planning a block party. Even Beasley cracked open a bottle of wine in the clubhouse kitchen. And me? I walked home under the pale streetlights, rainwater still glistening on the pavement. The air smelled clean, new. When I reached my porch, I paused and looked back down the street. Karen's house was dark, curtains drawn, driveway empty. For the first time, the neighborhood looked free, like the weight had finally lifted. Over the next few days, things moved fast. Wilson officially assumed the presidency. HOA emails came out friendlier, less robotic, fees were reduced, inspections were limited to actual safety issues. People smiled again. Kids laughed. The sound of hammers and drills returned, not fines, but repairs. The neighborhood, for once, felt human. But as peace returned, I couldn't shake one thought. Karen wouldn't leave quietly. And I was right. It started with whispers. Someone saw her car driving by late at night. Someone else said she'd posted in a local Facebook group under a new name, Community Truth Teller. 5-7. The posts were pure venom. HOA corruption. Board conspiracy. Unstable resident endangers families. I didn't respond. Let her rant. Let her words evaporate into digital air. But she wasn't done. One afternoon, I stepped outside to find a series of homemade signs hammered into her old front lawn. Red marker, bold letters, fake vote, corrupt board, dangerous neighbor next door. And the last one pointed directly at my house. He caused the fire. I stood there for a long moment, jaw tight, before chuckling under my breath. Of course. The neighbors gathered quickly, murmuring, taking photos. Beasley sighed. She's lost it. Wilson called the county office. The signs were removed within hours. But by then, the damage wasn't to me, it was to her. Everyone saw what Karen had become. That night, I got an email from Wilson. Short, simple, she's officially banned from HOA property for 6 months. Harassment clause. Sleep easy, Tom. And for the first time in years, I did. The following week, we held our first real neighborhood gathering, a bonfire and barbecue behind the clubhouse. No fines, no complaints, no restrictions, just people laughing, sharing food, living. As the fire crackled and the smell of grilled meat filled the air, Wilson raised a beer. To Tom, for standing up when the rest of us didn't. I shook my head. To Maple Ridge for finally standing up for itself. Cheers erupted. Someone started playing guitar. Kids roasted marshmallows. And for a while, I just sat there, watching the flames, feeling something I hadn't in a long time, peace. Across the field, the faint glow of headlights flickered. Karen's SUV, parked at a distance. Watching. Always watching. But I didn't care anymore. Because she'd already lost the one thing she valued most. Control. I leaned back in my chair, beer in hand, and whispered to the night, "You can't manage chaos, Karen. You can only burn in it." The fire popped loudly, as if in agreement. Autumn came early that year, as if the universe wanted to wipe the slate clean for Maple Ridge. The air smelled of pine and wood smoke instead of tension and cheap perfume. Lawns went uninspected. Mailboxes stood unmeasured, and for the first time in years, the sound of laughter replaced the sound of fines being written. Everywhere I looked, people were lighter. They decorated their porches with pumpkins and hay bales without checking the HOA handbook. Kids chalked the sidewalks, old men fixed their fences, women waved from driveways. You could feel the pulse of something this neighborhood hadn't known in a long time, freedom. I'd walk my usual route each morning, coffee in hand, jacket zipped against the crisp wind. Neighbors who once avoided eye contact now stopped to chat. "Morning, Tom. Hey, engineer guy. Got any more of that exploding wood?" I'd grin. Fresh out. Safety first. It became a running joke, the kind that would outlive us all. The Great Firewood Incident. They said it with affection now, like a shared legend. In some strange way, Karen's madness had given us what her rules never could: unity. Still, her old house stood empty, windows shuttered, grass overgrown. Realtors came and went, but no buyer stayed. Some said it was haunted by bad karma. Others whispered that Karen herself still drove by at night, circling the block like a ghost in a beige SUV. I didn't believe it until I saw her. It was late one Friday. I was in the workshop, sanding down a piece of oak for the new fire pit benches, when headlights cut across my window. The gate creaked open softly. Still playing with fire, I see. That voice. I turned, and there she was, Karen Whitmore, standing under the porch light, coat buttoned, hair darker now, shorter, streaked with gray. The queen had fallen, but the crown still glinted faintly in her posture. "Well," I said, wiping my hands, "if it isn't the ghost of bylaws past." She smirked weakly. "I came to get the last of my things. The new owners said I left some boxes in the shed." I nodded. "You know the way. I'll come with you. Don't want you stealing any more of my firewood." For the first time, she laughed, a quiet, honest sound. Fair enough. We walked to the shed together, the gravel crunching beneath our shoes. The night was still, the air cool, and for a strange moment, it felt like two veterans walking through the ruins of the same war. She opened the shed, pulled out a dusty box, then paused. You've changed this place. Had to, I said. It was starting to look like a prison yard. She stared down at the floorboards, running her hand over the rough wood. You know, I never meant for it to get that bad. I thought I was protecting something. Order, beauty, maybe myself. I didn't answer. Sometimes silence is kinder than truth. She glanced at me. Do they still talk about me? All the time, I said honestly, but less like a villain now, more like a cautionary tale. That one hurt. I saw it in her eyes. Funny, she whispered, how one mistake defines everything. One mistake? I said softly. Karen, you didn't make one mistake. You made a career out of them. Her lips parted, then closed again. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, she said, You know they call me HOA Karen online? There's a meme, my face on Firewood. I chuckled. Internet never forgets. She smiled faintly, then straightened. Well, I suppose I earned it. She turned to leave, the box clutched to her chest. At the gate, she hesitated. You know, you could have destroyed me completely. Posted that video, gone viral. You didn't. I didn't need to, I said. You did it yourself. She studied me, maybe searching for gloating, maybe for grace. Why didn't you? Because fire spreads, I said. And I've had enough of burning things. She nodded slowly, eyes glistening with something fragile. Goodbye, Tom. Goodbye, Karen. She walked away without looking back. And just like that, the ghost of Maple Ridge was gone. That night, I sat by the fire pit, the real one this time, built with proper stone, flames dancing soft and golden. The neighborhood had gathered again for our end-of-summer cookout. Kids roasted marshmallows, Wilson played guitar, and Mrs. Beasley was already 2 glasses of wine deep, laughing louder than the music. At some point, Wilson raised his beer. To Tom, our accidental hero, I shook my head. To freedom from HOA tyranny. Cheers erupted. Bottles clinked. Someone shouted, to science. Everyone laughed. When the crowd settled, I leaned back, staring at the flames. Sparks drifted upward, swirling into the night like tiny stars breaking free. Karen's house was dark now, but I imagined her somewhere out there, in another perfect neighborhood, lecturing someone about mailbox paint. Maybe she'd change, maybe not. Either way, it wasn't my concern anymore. I'd fought my war, and for once, I didn't need to win anymore. It was enough that peace had returned. Later, when the crowd thinned and the laughter faded, I stayed by the dying fire. Alone, the coals glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. I thought of my wife, of how she used to say, You can't control everything, Tom. Sometimes the best order comes from letting go. Maybe she'd been right all along. Karen tried to control a community and lost herself in the process. I tried to control my anger and nearly did the same. Maybe the two of us weren't so different, just on opposite sides of the same fence. I tossed another log onto the fire. It crackled and sparked, warm and alive. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, and the night wind carried the scent of rain and wood smoke through the air. Peaceful, ordinary, perfectly imperfect. The neighborhood had changed, but so had I. The next morning, I found something small in my mailbox. No address, no signature. Just a folded note written in neat, deliberate handwriting. Sometimes fire cleans more than it destroys. Kay. I smiled. Maybe there was hope for her after all. Weeks passed. The leaves turned amber, then gold, then fell. The new couple who bought Karen's house hosted a chilly night. They invited everyone, even me. As the evening light faded and laughter rose, I looked around at the people I once thought were strangers. Now, they felt like a family forged in shared absurdity, and when someone inevitably brought up the story, the explosion, the meeting, the downfall, I didn't roll my eyes or change the subject. I told it like a fable, because that's what it had become. A story about a neighborhood, a tyrant, and an engineer with too much time on his hands, about pride, consequence, and poetic justice. But more than that, it was a story about limits. You can build fences, You can write rules. You can measure lawns with rulers, but you can't legislate humanity. People need freedom. And sometimes they need a little chaos to remind them they're alive. Before heading home that night, I lingered by the fire pit, feeling its heat against the cold October air. I raised my beer one last time, not in mockery, but in respect for the lesson, for the absurdity, for the strange little miracle that Maple Ridge had become. To balance, I said quietly. Because in the end, that's what it was all about. Balance between order and freedom, between justice and mercy, between laughter and fire. And as the flames flickered low, I knew one thing for sure. Peace doesn't come when rules are obeyed. It comes when fear finally burns out.